first question for you is, where did your overall inspiration for this collection come from?
Well, the whole collection is, 29 years of work. I would say the inspiration for me to become an artist are people like Jackson Pollock and Mark Rothko and Delaunay, and I also really like some obscure people, like Vic Munoz. I love his work. This guy isn't not well known, but Damien Hirst, I love his stuff. But they don't really show up in the work that much, other than I enjoy looking at that kind of stuff. Malkovich, I like his stuff too. But ironically, I started painting and drawing because in elementary school they have this thing, it's like a scholastics thing, where you do contests of stuff. One of them was called Pictionary. Not Pictionary, something to do with pictures. And what you had to do is you had to look at like 300 pictures and identify who the people were. And it was the first time I ever saw Jackson Pollock. And I'm like, what the hell is this guy doing? Because I come from West Texas, and they weren't doing that kind of stuff. And I'm like, they're calling that art? And when I found out what modernism was and abstract expressionism, then I'm like, I could do this. Because it's all about paint, it's all about movement, color. The thing that I do that is a big no-no is I add content to all of them, which in modern art does not exist. It's only about color, and it's only about paint and canvas, that kind of thing. But I've always felt like I needed to tell these stories, and simply because no one else was telling them.
I know you touched on growing up in Western Texas. Could you maybe expand on how growing up in kind of like the Deep South influenced your work, and how your childhood in general kind of influenced a lot of your pieces?
Well, some of the later pieces, like the land pieces, those are all about getting out of Texas. I have family there, and I love my family, but I don't particularly like living there. Yeah. It's not cultured. It's people are very closed-minded. Lots of racism, lots of bigotry, homophobia, misogyny, all kinds of stuff. And unfortunately, a lot of it comes from the Bible, especially the misogyny stuff. Because when I grew up, my mother was told that she had to obey my father. And she really believed that. And so he was the head of the household. Some of these ones right here, the Down by the River and Dead Elvis, or Elvis in Ruins, those dealt with the abuse that I had when I was in West Texas. I did realistic portraits of places and people that abused me, or physically, sexually, mentally, all that kind of stuff. And then I methodically went over the whole thing after I painted it very realistically and covered it up in abstraction in a way to beautify something horrible. This one right here, this again women, that's kind of how Southern people talk. It's against women. I had made a conscious decision that when I went back home, if anyone asked me about my sexuality or anything, I'd be very honest with them. So I went to church because my dad was a deacon, and we always had to sit in front and that kind of stuff. So this lady's like, "Oh, you're married?" And I said, "No, I got this from my partner." And then you could just see the wheels going around in her head, like, "What? Are you again women?" And I told her, I said, "I ain't again nobody," which that entire show was called "I Ain't Again Nobody."
That's awesome. That's really cool.
So, I mean, there's all kinds of, I had one called tap dancing that dealt with racism, which I drew with my feet.
Oh, wow, that's really cool.
I've always really been enamored of drawing, also very energetic painting, and kind of bold, in-your-face colors.
Yeah, I think that's what I love most about your work, is just kind of like those in-your-face, like bold hues.
Yeah, I mean, people
that
put
really just
white
jump
in
out.
everything. I'm like, why not just put bright red?
Why not?
It's pretty.
Yeah, definitely. I know I saw that you use like some unusual materials such as wine. How did you like working with like kind of unusual stuff like that?
I have always done that kind of stuff, from burning things into using dirt, gravel. This one was very specific with the wine. I actually took real wine and poured it on mylar, which is plastic, let that dry, and then I put acrylic and oil pastel on top of it. And all the titles of them are the titles of real bottles of wine. So, I mean, some of them were very specific. That one's called Bitch. I had one called Evil. That one's called Frog's Piss. There is a Pinot Evil, which I like too. Fat Bastard, which a lot of people know what that one is. Yeah. So I like the idea of playing with that. And a question was said at the talk, you know, I didn't know about all this stuff, and if I came up in the gallery and saw it, I would never make that connection. And I'm like, well, I don't care if you do or not. Yeah. I don't. That's my process. That's how I do it, how I came up with it. And if you say that looks like a pretty pony, good for you.
So you kind of touched on like your abuse that you experienced growing up. Has art been kind of a form of therapy for you with that? And how has kind of your personal narrative come through with that?
Yeah, definitely. I've often said to my students, I've taught at Metro, I've taught at Boulder and DU. I said, you know, if I wasn't painting and drawing, I'd probably be on top of a rooftop shooting people. Because everyone needs that kind of escape or some way to say something about things. My new work is called Blood. It's all about blood ties. It's also about the physical nature of blood and that kind of thing. And because blood's been a big part of my life in the last couple of years, a lot of health stuff. So I thought that's the easiest way. It's just, I'm not going to call it My Delusions of Dying or something. I'm just going to call it Blood. Yeah. That's what it is.
Straight to the point. I like it.
But I have used it, especially, you know, those two where I blocked over them. The name of the show was Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder. So, and this was about an amendment that was going to ban gay rights. So I do things about things that happen to me. Have happened, happen, maybe might happen.
Very cool. I really appreciate kind of like your strength that you've kind of shown through your artwork and stuff. It definitely comes across.
Sometimes artists are very much kind of like badasses. Like, I'm an artist, if you don't like what I am doing, then, you know, F you. But I use it as a platform, and if people don't like my work, that's fine. Every show I've ever had, someone's told me my work sucked. And which this one particular, I had sold out the whole show, and this one guy said, I really love your work, but I really don't like that one too much. And the lady came right up and paid me right there. I'm like, and he said something like, everyone has different tastes, right? Yeah, some people have good taste and some people have bad taste.
I love that.
Don't mess with an artist if you don't know the lingo.
I think you can kind of see that that art kind of is a form of rebellion. Could you say that for yourself, that you're kind of rebelling against culture or what people may think of?
I know. Yeah, I mean, you may look at me and say, oh God, he's an older guy, whatever. But I grew up during the punk movement. I was very much into punk, post-core, hardcore, all that kind of stuff, which was very hard to get in West Texas. But I've always kind of, like the Amendment 2 piece, I was just like, you can't tell me what to do. You will never tell me what to do. I'll go to jail first. And be a good artist at it, not just because I'm Chinese. I didn't say that. Who is it, Pai Bai, that's in jail right now, or he just got out of jail? But there was another group that went to jail that I really liked in Russia called Pussy Riot. Do you remember them? They kind of did a thing on the church. And I have been in highly politicized shows. Like when the Pope came here, we had an anti-Pope show, and it was supposed to be at the Mercury Theater, but the FBI had got involved and took all our work down. So I'm probably on the FBI list somewhere.
A means of being an artist. So I'm a art history major myself, so I love like curating and stuff like that. What processes do you go through when you decide how to arrange your work in a gallery?
Well, this show was pretty much chronological.
Okay.
So it was also a matter of, I really chose mainly one piece from every show, two at the max if they're small, because, I mean, that's huge.
It's massive,
It's
yeah.
huge. So, I mean, I could do that whole show over in this one space.
Yeah.
So, finding the works that seem to really speak volumes about, like the pinnacle of what you were trying to say at that time.
Okay.
Like the big black and white piece back there, that was done after a owner of a gallery came by my space, and he was like, oh, because I dealt with him before, and he sends out to people for them to buy stuff, and he says, I have this one lady, and she's really a pain in the ass. She wants difficult art, and all I could think of was you. I'm like, difficult? I'm not difficult. So I did a whole show called Difficult Art.
That's cool. That's awesome. So I think a lot of abstract expressionism, like it's kind of like art for art's sake. It doesn't have kind of like a cultural purpose or political purpose. Do you think that that's something that is still has importance in society today, like art for art's sake, or do you think kind of like popular culture and materialism is taking over?
Well, I do kind of mix politics a little bit in my work, but not too much. I mean, I used to really be right in your face about it. But I do like art for art's sake. I think it's beautiful. I think it's Frank Stella who's been getting under attack lately, saying that his work isn't worthy of museums. I'm like, really? He did things that no one else has done.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's really only the stupid people that get really popular. Like my hero, Jackson Pollock, was not an intelligent man. And he was a kind of vicious man. His wife's Lee Krasner, I love her work.
Yeah, she's amazing.
Yeah, I think she's better than he is. But he did, and I always clock people on this. He did something that no one else had done before him. No one. And he created a new movement. And that's a big deal. Same way with Warhol. You may not like his work, but he created a new thing.
And it's stuff that's still completely recognizable in today's culture, even 50 years later. Or whatever.
Yeah, there's a lot of Japanese art out there now that is really pushing pop culture. Murakami is one of them, where they take these kind of like Japanese things, but they put it in an art context. And so I really applaud people that are really thinking. I mean, in a way, I'm not thinking out of the box. I'm pretty much in the art history box. You know, I'm not throwing a roast beef and lay on the road or something.
But I still think a lot of your work has a really like special and unique message that I don't like using things like wine for like a specific, you know, like that resonates.
Yeah, and
in your
if
life
people
about it.
ask me about it, then I'll tell them, you know, why it's that way, or that black and white drawing, that's done with drawing materials, not paint. The white America things are very political, because I think white people are very privileged in this country, well, in the world, really. And so, I don't know if you noticed, there's artwork inside the white America one, and it's Norman Rockwell, who is the whitest painter in America.
I actually have a presentation on minimalism on Thursday, so these are like all the same names that I'm.
But it's very white.
Yeah. Totally, but I think you can still definitely consider it. I mean, a white canvas is still art, I mean, in my opinion.
I tell my students, I like things that either shock me, mystify me, or make me laugh. Like, I'm like, oh, that's funny. That's funny, or like, oh my God, I had this one assignment where you take something on your body and you blow it up, you magnify it a lot, and she brought in this real shiny metal thing, and it was beautifully drawn, and I was like, you know, what is that? And she says, oh, it's my a vaginal clip, or whatever you want to call it. And I was like, oh my God, that makes it even better.
So I guess I just want to close out with the question of what's the most personal piece you've ever created, or your favorite piece you've ever created? If you could just specifically talk about one piece and kind of expand on it.
I would say this one, You and Me, was a breakthrough one. There were some that were real breakthroughs that I couldn't get. But this is done by my husband and myself. He did all of the lettering for it, which there's the lettering. He makes up languages sometimes. So and that's a real thing, believe it or not. Elvish, think about that, that's made up. What's the Star Trek one?
Not familiar.
Or the Game of Thrones language that they use. Those are all made up languages. So he had done that a long time ago. He doesn't do it now, but I really wanted it to be something about both of us. So the lyric is from a Tricky song, who's a rapper, and it goes, you and me, what does that mean? Forever, what does that mean? Always, what does that mean? It means we'll manage, I'll master your language, and in the meantime we'll create our own. And I just thought it's really personal. I never can show this piece because it's so huge. That's not to say I don't want to make bigger pieces. I was like, oh, I could make one as big as that wall. But I mean, you're not selling to people at that point, you're selling to museums.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed
Oh, you're
sitting down.
welcome.
Your work's amazing, so
Thank
it's really cool to
you.
hear everything about it.
Thank you.